Hey everyone, I just installed the newest version of E3 2026 and I thought I'd take the opportunity to show you a little bit about how I set up my E3 personally, and then just give you a bit of a few tips and pointers and a few things like that. Obviously E3 is super customizable and flexible. You can make it to suit you and how you use E3, but this is how I do it. Um, Normally when I do a fresh install on site, I do something like this. Otherwise, because I just loaded E3, I would fix it up. In this case, 2026 actually is really good. There's a setting that allows you to copy, setting workspace and a few of those things over from the old version to the new version. But in this case, I just avoided it and just pretended like I've never had E3, and this is a fresh install for you guys. First things first, my workspace is a mess. I've got a bunch of stuff that I won't use, and I'll go through some of that and explain some of that. But first things first, I want to move my components. I like to have my database window on the right hand side. The smart docking makes life super easy. I can just point to the little icon, and then I want to put the preview. I want to snap it to the bottom half over here. So automatically I have my database window and I have my preview. So if I click on something, I'll have a preview. Hopefully there's something with the photo. I'll see exactly what it is and make it nice and clear. For the components, I don't need characteristics, so I'll right click and turn it off. I'll move this across and potentially info column across. I'll also right click at the top and I'm going to do component search configuration. I'll add the component name. Oops, double click it or hit the right arrow, but component name, description. I can do letter just on my keyboard DES, and the same is supplier SU, and then hit there. So I'll put these three. You can add as many or as little as you want, obviously, or you can create your own attribute. Um, the next thing I want to do is the tree structure. If I right click at the top, I'll go to tree structure. I'm going to hit redefine just so there's something there. And I'm just going to put, say, PJ default. And then I'm going to change these. So I'll add a couple of layers. And then I want the last one to be, say, supplier. Structure node, I want supplier. Class. And main class. Cool. Info column, I want counts, just so it's going to show me how many I've got in each particular thing. I like to do main class, class supplier. This is a fresh database and a fresh install, so it's got nothing, but I like to put things in different main classes. So if I do something for a specific customer site use case, it will sit on a different, otherwise I can have a favorites folder, but I might show you how that works in a second. You can tweak over here what shows up how, as far as the component name will show up in the green icon, and then the info column will show up in the info column. The description will show up in the info column, but that's all I need. Okay, save that one, and then now I've got my electric, and then I'll have my connectors, and then I'll have my AMP connectors, and then so you can see now I've got 15 AMP connectors, so that count is what shows up in the info column for the folder. And then I can see pretty clearly and navigate my way through a bit easier. So many different ways of doing this, but you can add as many layers and levels as you want to, but I like to have a few folder structure, not just the default class. That way you can filter through things. So that's the database side, pretty good. Ignoring this other stuff here, with the messages and results, this is a variable, I guess. I have a 4K monitor and resolution, so I've got a fair bit of space over here, but some people will do an auto hide, so it will show up when they hover over it, but by default it will not be there. So when I have something, I can check my results, but otherwise they won't be taking up any space, which is sort of what I want. On my tree on the left hand side, the project tree, it should be pretty relevant and active. Again, I snapped it to the icon. sheet device tab. If you've got panel, you'll have these two, and if you've got form board, you'll have the form board. So panel placed, not placed, and then the form board. But again, mainly these two are the ones that you'll want. Over here, if you right click, there is also tree control properties. You can do a structure to sort it by a document type is the default. Otherwise, you can use a structure if there was one given a template file. You can. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But it just means that if this sheet property has a document type of schematic, then it'll be in the schematic folder. But normally what I like to do, depending on the purpose and things like that, but if I just do another one and I'll change this second one to document type, is going to be, say, a harness um, drawings, then I can have it sort of like this. I'll explain why I'm doing this as well, but something like this, and I'm pretty much happy. I have my schematics and my harness. Potentially even if I just do just make it sorted a bit better, a bit neater. We'll go from there. So yeah, this way I've got my schematics first and my harness drawing. So potentially I might have like a big schematic that might be 2, 3, 5, 10 pages, but then there'll be multiple harnesses, and then those harnesses might be 50, 100 harnesses out of those few schematic sheets. But kind of the order I like it, hence the why I've got 1 and 2. Again, I'll show you how that works. The new so I have laid out my workspace as far as the project windows. I've got a sheet open. I have 2 sheets, 1 schematic, 1 harness. So I've already got a structure in there. If you want to do a more detailed structure into the project properties, you can add the XML. Um, the the default installation has a really good structure in the cooling water pump example. So if you go to see users, public documents, Zuken E3.26 data pump E, structure templates rather. There's the IAC location product, so that you can use a classic one, for example. Okay, so in the tree properties, rather than sorting, you can use the different structure that doesn't have anything. Okay, anyways, but yeah, you can use an XML. I'll just leave it here, but you can use an XML and have a defined structure. The XML obviously can live on a server. That way, someone can make a change to it multiple times, and then once they change it multiple times, then they can not affect the drawing overall. The other thing as well, the sheet template here currently has the attribute that is number of sheets in project. You can actually change the sheet template to say number of sheet folder structure. So you'll have schematics 1 of 1 and then harness drawing 1. But again, that functionality is there. If you want to do that, you can just jump to symbol miscellaneous tree. You can edit this one to open in the database editor and just change that attribute over. So the next is the top workspace. You can see it's a bit of a mess. Like I said, I've got a pretty high resolution on the screen, so I've got plenty of space. But if you're using a small portable laptop, then it can get a bit tricky. But move these across whichever way you want. Now it depends what use you're using E3 and how, and a lot of things for that matter. But in my case, I don't use pneumatics too much. So this is the hose tube settings. I can right click and I can remove hose tube settings. If I don't use it, then there's no point. Excuse me. The next thing is the selection pane. I really like the selection pane when you need it, but it's also a bit tricky to be there when you don't. So again, just for this purpose, I'm going to find the selection and then remove it. I just want to keep it as relevant as possible. Move the component cloud stuff to the top. and then I might even move this over here just because I've got heaps of space. The rest is pretty good. I want to put this button on by default, mark inline connection points. It just means that when I draw a connection line, the dot will appear like so. The reason why I'm switching it on now is I want some of these default settings to be ready in my template file, which is the next step I'm going to do. So for argument's sake, I'm also going to change my default to front wire. That makes sense. Now from here, you can remove buttons and things like that. You can go into a lot of detail. One of the buttons I do recommend deleting for someone who's just starting to use E3 is this button here, generate signals. I've seen a lot of people use, instead of clicking this one, they'll click this one. And I'll show you what that is. But if I add a wire, let's just say here, I want to place another core number and they'll potentially hit this button here. I've seen people accidentally hit this button, thinking that's a text placeholder. So when that button is selected, anytime I draw a connection line, you'll see that there's a new signal generated. However, if this button is switched off, when I do draw a connection line, it will have no signal, and if I draw between points, then the no signal will actually transfer across. So there will be a pretty significant mix-up, excuse me, and then you can lose a lot of logic and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a dangerous one as such. So if you click on the arrow at the end, add and remove buttons, connect, you can remove generate signals. That way you're not at risk of accidentally messing it up, I guess. This is another one I use default wire when connecting. Some people don't use this normally, so they'll get rid of it. That way, if they accidentally click this when hitting the insert default wire button, then it gets in the way and things like that. So again, you can clean that up. The bottom is pretty good as it is, I think, but you can move it across. You can move it to the top and bottom, and potentially in my case, I could actually put everything on the one line. Not going to for this purpose, but yeah, you can clean it up. Excuse me. So that's on Workspace pretty good. My database is set with the configuration, the tree structure, and then my searches. I'm going to get rid of these, and I'm going to purge unused because I want a blank project with nothing in the device tree. So from here, I can go to settings. Some of the settings that I do by default, it's currently okay. It's using, so when E3 opens, it will use this project IEC template file. Otherwise, the settings actually copy to or save to the project that you have open. But every time I open a new project, it's going to revert back to this template file. So in this case, I want to, my grid's correct. It is for 1.5. This is Australian or IEC units, so 4 millimeters. You'd have a factor of an inch if you had it in US. But the alternate grid is one that I recommend you can do. I'll just set it at 1. You can do anything for an alternate grid. I recommend a factor of the grid size. I'll explain why. And snap size should always be a little bit less than the grid size. So if you were to type it in or change something manually, the software wants to do like just over half, which can be messy. But yeah, I recommend grid size 4, snap size 1.5, and alternate grid be anything but again a factor of 4. What that means is when you're drawing, you can see, hopefully you can see the grid points. When I draw, it will snap to these 4 millimeter points. But if I hold control, I can use the alternate grid. So you can see now it's snapping to 1 millimeters. Using the alternate grid, it just means that well, using it as a factor, it means it's really easy to snap it back to where it needs to be, or make it halfway or something like that. When you do a 0, it means you can place it anywhere, and then all of a sudden drawing gets really messy really quickly, and things don't line up as you want, and they're tricky. Why you would use an alternate grid? Sometimes you have a wire coming between 2 points. and you've got a second, so if this is a connector here, let's just say, if you've got a second wire coming through, you might want to use the alternate grid and say you want something that goes, say, halfway there, or even slightly less than halfway. There we go. Cool. Something along these lines. That way you can put it between and not mess up the overall grid and get where you need to out the door. Again, let me purge. So the rest of the settings, you can hit S for settings. These are pretty good. Under general display, I normally like to do resize the text box, enlarge grid points, and then display preview of selected symbol and component. The grid points, if I hit apply, I'll show you what that works. So if I zoom in, the grid points are a lot more visible now, whereas before they stay the same size. They get harder to see. The other one is the text to fit text box. So you can have a text placeholder of some sort, and it'll have a text box. And these are normally set in the table, potentially, something like this. If I just put it there, it means that when I type it indefinitely large, it will keep resizing it to fit the font that it's in. It's a great thing for the tables. Again, you can edit the sheet template, table symbols, and things like that. It just means that it will not overlap the table spacing in allocation and such. So again, those three settings recommend having. And then the selector ones are really good. So if I have one of these connectors in my drawing, when I click on the connector in my drawing, you'll see the preview will actually show you here what it is, whether it's in the tree, over here, or in the project. I think it shows up here. So otherwise, if that setting is off, which is this one, it won't be there. So that one's the one that I do. The highlight by default is crazy close. I like to do a 15, and just so when it highlights or zooms to something, it's not super close. You can see a bit of what it is, 15, 20, somewhere around there. Language, you want to make sure your correct language is set up. And then zoom pan select. The zoom in ratio is really slow, so I change it to 15 and I also enable panning when arrowed. So it means that when I hold control and scroll, it's relatively quick without being too quick. By default, you need to do a lot of mouse scrolling to zoom in. And then once I've zoomed in, I can use my cursors to go left. If I go up the top, you can see that I can go left, up, down. Again, you can tweak it whichever way you want, but this is sort of less where I found it to be helpful. And then the next one is connection under the cable core logic lines. I like to by default switch on the use cavity, these two. What that means is once you connect into a connector with the wire size, it will try and match the connector pin terminal. If the wire size is too big, too small, assuming it's defined in the database, it won't let you connect the wire, and if there's multiple pin terminals, then you'll pick the right pin terminal based on the wire size. But again, a good one to have on by default. Otherwise, you can start to do drawings and then you realize it's not hasn't been switched on, and you've put wires that don't fit. From here, there's a lot more you can do, but the dimension is the last one that I like to do. I'll put net segment. So when I dimension line, I want to refer back to the manufacturing length. I like to put a space suffix for millimeters. I don't need a precision of point anything for millimeters. Millimeters is specific enough as it is. So again, this is probably more of a US unit. I like to do an offset of 1, and then you can tweak your arrow line styles and things like that. But what that means is if I draw a line, say there's a connection line here, and then if I have my next segment manufacturing length of 200 millimeters, when I press M to measure between this point and this point, you can see here I have 200 millimeters, no decimal space. the arrow, line extension, things like that, that are all based on that setting. But if I if I go dimension properties, you can see, yeah, it's picking up the suffix, offset and things. So with the offset, I do like to have an offset. If I don't, you can see it sits on the line. The reason why an offset is handy is depending on your printing resolution or when you export the PDF and things like that. I found, when the line's directly above, uh, when it was there. Let me just put this one back. But anyways, if I put it back to 0, so the bottom can get cut out. So again, it looks a bit weird and a bit harder to read. So an extension line offset is probably, an offset is probably a handy one. And then again, you can change your arrows and things like that that you need to. So I'll delete this and again, purge. So I've got a blank project as far as componentry and stuff goes. Signals. Actually, you might want to go view signal tree and add the signal tree to your project space. So from here, again, you can tweak any settings that you may or may not need, but I'm pretty happy with that. There's not really much else, depending on what modules and stuff you might have, but you don't really need to worry about them. So from here, the next thing I want to do, or the last thing I want to do is, the second last thing. If you go view workspace configurations, you can make sure this one is switched off and we can save our default workspace. You can actually, probably not a bad thing to do is create a new and say this is my single screen default and I'll save it. It just means at any moment, if you're in and out of the office and you plug into your second screen and you move it out, these project and database windows can be sitting on another screen. It means that you can always revert back pretty easily, but having this switched off is probably the thing that I can recommend. The reason is if it saves current workspace on closing application, if you're anything like me, you make a mistake. Let me just quickly close E3 and relaunch it. It means that it will save, if this one was on a different screen and I couldn't find it or something like that, and I close the application, it would save its location. So by doing that, I can actually use this button here, restore workspace, and then restore, and it'll bring it back to where it needs to be. So you don't have to worry about relaunching. But again, it's not going to save anything that you've done accidentally anyways, just by closing. Yeah, so now the last step is my template file. So like I said earlier, under general, this is the default settings. So anytime I open a new project, it will load this project IAC. So all I need to do here is file, save as. I'm going to change my type to E3T. And then I'm going to go to, in this case, I'm going to put in the default directory, but realistically, you can put it on a server. So everyone's pointing, if you've got multiple users, put it on a server, everyone's pointing to it. Under public documents, Zuken 26, you can see the project IEC is there. If you get ANSI, you use the project ANSI. Hit save. This will overwrite the project IEC. So the next time I open E3, it will load these settings by default, which is what I want. So when I open it from now, it will look like this, and it will also open these relevant settings with this. So if I close this project for argument's sake and I open a new one, you can see I've got two sheets already, a schematic and a harness drawing. There's nothing in there as far as my device tree, or you could potentially have some work instructions and whatever else by default. So that way, every time you are reloading, you've got all the stuff in there that you may or may not need. So yeah, hopefully this helps and is useful. If you got any tips yourselves or anything that you recommend, definitely keen to hear about it in the comment section. But yeah, thanks again for watching and have a good one.